Well, hello, NI leaders. So good to see you again. First, thank you so much for having me during your conference. It was such an honor to be there. And I love seeing the chat bar light up with your questions and your insights and your everyday innovator styles. I hope you are continuing to leverage that knowledge about innovation as a whole, but also how you innovate and how you lead strong during uncertain times. With that, there were 4 questions that were really great questions that we just didn't have time to get to in our session. You had other great sessions to get to that I wanted to take a moment and respond to and answer because I think they'll provide you some valuable insight into how to turn knowledge into action and how to really think about how to leverage your everyday innovator style. And once you learn the everyday innovator styles of your teams to go further faster. So let me read off this question and get to it. So the first question is it possible to acquire a new style which my team needs? If yes, how to do that? Okay, great question. So can you acquire a new style? So I've got a few ways that I can answer this for you. One is absolutely, you could recruit specifically and hire those people and integrate them into your team. You could have the IQE as part of your hiring process. Many clients do that, but not every team has that capability. So let me give you 2 other suggestions that help you get that everyday innovator style on your team that you might need in a way that isn't necessarily totally hiring from scratch. So the first one is something that I call a dotted line project involvement. What that means is you bring someone in on your work that maybe isn't specifically on your core team, but can contribute both their knowledge and their everyday innovator style to your work, to your project. Let me give you an example. So I have a government agency that I work with, and one of the challenges that they faced could really benefit from having a risk taker on their team, someone to push boundaries, to get into those uncomfortable places and ideas and have kind of a big, bold picture in front of them. So they did not have this on their core team, but they had a few people in their department that had risk takers as part of their power triggers or everyday innovator styles. So in the greater department, those people existed. So they asked 2 of those people if they would provide their input at their monthly meetings and give their feedback on ideas. Brilliant, right? It was like a dotted line part of the core team. So they weren't necessarily involved in the day-to-day. They had other things they had to do as well, but they created this kind of expanded dotted line team that allowed them to incorporate that risk taker thinking that they so needed at key moments in their project. Now, if you can bring in those people dotted line full time onto your project, fantastic. But oftentimes that's not the case. So create a situation where there are milestones, moments, certain key areas where you need feedback or you need ideas where you can dotted line bring those people in. Dotted line involvement. So this is my favorite approach because you really get 2 benefits. You get some naive intelligence, maybe people who aren't like in the thick of it every day with you, and you get their innovator strengths working for you. So a client of mine who's in the HVAC business, they actually, what they do for the dotted line is they bring people onto their team that are up and downstream from them. So they recruit people that do the work before their job, right? Before kind of them in the whole overall process, and then after their jobs. And they bring them in based on their everyday innovator styles and their jobs. So the people, again, are contributing both. And they use them as almost like an advisory panel to vet out things at key milestones and when they need to make this decisions. So again, dotted line. So I love the dotted line approach for the reasons that are probably obvious to you. It brings in naive intelligence, it brings in new perspectives, new people, and the triggers that you need without necessarily having to hire. Now, there's a second suggestion that I have, which is a little bit different. So here's the thing, we're all like equalizers. So you remember those old things on stereos? So we have 2 power triggers, and we have maybe a little bit of all the other triggers, and then our dormant trigger that we have the least of. But we can play in the other triggers when it's required, but it's going to take some warm up. It's going to take some activity, but we can stretch our thinking to try to cover that perspective if need to. So another approach could be to occasionally take the team through an innovation exercise or 2 that speak directly to the style you are missing. It's not necessarily the same as having that person and their everyday innovator style and their brilliance in the room, but it could help you fill the gaps and do some stretching in this area if you absolutely need to. So for example, I don't have an imaginative on my team. We're small. I'm not going to hire for that right now. Down the road, I'm hoping to. And there are times, though, when novel thinking and playing in the gaps, the way imaginatives do so well, would really be helpful given some of the new challenges we are facing. So just the other day in a meeting, I had the team go through an exercise that really resonates and triggers that imaginative mind. And we did it. It's this exercise where we remove some of the data and the research in front of us to create space. And then we innovate off what we don't know, off that space. Perfect for an imaginative. For us, a little bit harder. We had to warm up into it, but it allowed us to stretch ourselves in a more imaginative way. So to answer your question about filling in the gaps on your team when you really need certain styles, hire, absolutely. Use the IQE like a lot of our clients do. Number two, dotted line project involvement from people in your organization that could help you fill that gap. And three, do some exercises that fill in the gap to help you at least make sure you're not totally missing that perspective. All right. The next question is, do company cultures select for specific power triggers like this? We, being NI, seem to collect inquisitive, collaborative innovators. Yeah, so interesting, right? I find this fascinating. So yes, on two levels. So the first is different jobs or industries tend to attract different types of people naturally. So NI tends to attract inquisitives and collaboratives. I'm guessing that's based on the type of work that you do, the industry that you're in. When I work with IT departments, I worked with a lot of IT groups, both in companies and through associations over the years. When I look at their patterns, I find they tend to attract tweakers and futuristics, which actually makes a lot of sense because that type of job attracts people that are strong and enjoy iterating and thinking ahead to the impact, right? That's the tweaker and the futuristic, and their job requires it. So yes, there's an attraction that happens naturally. However, on a second level, as humans, we tend to surround ourselves with people like us, right? That's been a trap of hiring since the dawn of time, right? We hire like-minded people, people who feel comfortable to us. So you may not get away from having a higher number of inquisitives and collaboratives due to the nature of the work at NI, and that's okay. But I would absolutely encourage you to make sure you are looking for diversity of innovators so that you don't become a collective of the same. That you don't want. In fact, Harvard research has shown that organizations with more diversity of thinking are more resilient, more collaborative, more innovative, and their work, the output, tends to be more long-lasting and higher impact. That's why I think knowing your team's everyday innovator styles and intentionally rounding out your strengths is important. So to answer your question, yes, some of that happens naturally, and that's okay. But also there's a trap we need to make sure that we don't fall into in hiring like-minded people. Remember, ideas from birds of a feather tend to die, but ideas from diversity of thinking tend to thrive. So we got to fight that natural instinct of ours to hire and work with people like us. All right, these are great questions. The next one is there a way we can gauge these qualities while hiring so that we hire a diverse team? Absolutely. So we have clients that use the IQE as part of their hiring process. They use it both for new people coming in and internally to make sure they're putting people in the right places or when they do rotations or promotions. So they do this to both, like I said, to assess who to hire, but also to ensure they are setting that person up for success, for leveraging their strengths, for putting them into roles and projects and teams that bring out their best work. Teams then benefit because they understand how that person thinks, and the newer hire or the newer person on the team comes to the team with more respect and value out of the gate. So that allows for an easier integration into the team and easier collaboration among the team. I want to give you a little bit of a flip on this that I actually feel pretty strongly about. So I'm glad you asked the question. This is kind of the last thing I'll say on this one is I'll say what also helps with the everyday innovator styles is it helps team create something that I call contribution mapping, creating contribution-based teams when needed. Here's what I mean. Oftentimes, projects are formed based on job titles, but sometimes what you really need on a project is based on their strongest contributions. I think you probably feel this given the questions I get about how do I bring together the right team? How do I fill in the gaps on the triggers, right? We want people with the right contributions on the team. So when you know everybody's everyday innovator styles, you can assemble a team based both on knowledge and job experience, but also on the contributions that are going to get you to the finish line faster and in the best way. Let me show you actually a quick document that I have. Let me pull this up for you because I think this will help kind of bring this to life and what I mean about contributions. This is a document that we created. It's about how you successfully lead your team through change and innovation based on your triggers, right? Based on your everyday innovator style. And different triggers have different value that they bring to the table, different contribution. So I'm not going to take the time to go through all of this. I just want to make the point that sometimes with the teams, the best way to assemble the right team, the best team for the work, isn't just on job title, but it's because you need someone that's going to help you get clarity, right? You need a fluid, or you need someone that's going to help pave the way for others, make others feel comfortable with those bold risks. Or maybe you need someone like an inquisitive who's going to break old thinking patterns because that's part of the value that they bring, their contribution. Or you need someone who's going to show progress and results because things are getting stalled out or analysis paralysis is setting in. So part of building the best teams and part of creating that experience and getting the right people in the right role is not just about kind of job title or even experience. It's also about contribution. This is one of my favorite things to do with clients, is to do contribution mapping. It's so exciting to see how everybody fits together and the value that they bring. Okay, last but just as important question is, and this one's a little different. Those were really about teams and diversity of thinking. And this one's about communicating and getting people on board with change. So this is a good one to end on. So the question is, what do I do with those legacy thinkers on my team that won't let go of the past and are slowing down our efforts to move forward? Oh, we all have them, don't we? Those legacy thinkers that this is why I won't work. Here's what happened 10 years ago. Let me tell you what got me to success yesterday, because we should just do that again, even though it's not going to work today, right? Legacy thinkers. And what I find oftentimes is those legacy thinkers are needed because they're the ones that we need to get buy-in, to get approval, to get resources, to get that, thumbs up to move forward. Sometimes those people are on our team. Sometimes they're our leadership. Sometimes we're that person. The key is to get them on board with change. So I've got two really great tools to help you do that, that build on each other. So go with me on this, because I think this is a really important thing. I'm so glad you asked it, because this to me is, it's one thing to have ideas and to innovate, but then you got to get traction. You got to get buy-in on those ideas. And those legacy thinkers hold us back because they're not on board with change. So two things that I want you to do. The first one is, this is going to surprise you a little bit. I want you to have empathy. I want you to realize that when you're communicating with the legacy thinker on your team, that person is coming from a place of feeling irrelevant, like they're on thin ice, like all this change makes them totally irrelevant in everything that you're doing. Remember in the keynote, we talked about people don't fear change. They fear being changed. So when they're being bombarded with change and innovation, well, yeah, intellectually, it's the right thing to do. And I wish I could just say, get on board, Bob, like this is how it works. It's not really how it works. And when I come to that person with a little bit more empathy and an understanding of where they're coming from, I'm going to connect with them better. And in that connection, I'm going to get them to move forward. So the first thing I just want you to recognize is have some empathy. Know that they probably feel like they're on thin ice and that their own identity, their own way of being is being challenged. And hey, they need to get on board with change. Don't get me wrong, but it's important to understand where they're coming from, because if we can understand where they're coming from, we can move them forward. Now, in moving them forward, I have a tool for you that I have found in my career has helped me almost every time move those legacy thinkers forward. I call it then, now questions. And what these questions allow me to do is to get them to talk about the past, because here's the thing. I want their experience. I want to know what didn't work. I want to know why they're questioning it. I want to know what happened 10 years ago. There is value in that knowledge. I think sometimes we overlook the value in those legacy thinkers' past knowledge. So then and now is going to unlock that information that's actually highly valuable to me, but also I'm going to move them forward in today. So then and now, unlock then, move them forward into now. Let me give you an example of what I mean. I was in a meeting, I was presenting an idea to a team, and of course there was a legacy thinker in the room talking about all the reasons why this idea wouldn't work. Now, you and I both know that the situation, the variables, even the idea then and now are drastically different. but that person was stuck in the past. So for them, I said, okay, Jill, what didn't work then? And what would you do differently now? You see what I did there? What didn't work then? And what would you do differently now? Let them tell you all the things that didn't work, but then get those wheels turning about how they would do it differently now. So if you want to talk about the marketplace and the variables so that you can get a better grasp on like, hey, things are different today, the question could be, all right, Gail, what was the situation then? And what is similar or different about it today? So let them tell you all the variables that are then, and then you'll see they'll talk themselves into what's different about it today. And maybe some things are similar and you can leverage there, but then and now. And the last question I'll share is if you've got someone who is stuck in the then of success and they want to do everything the same, what I like to ask that person, the then and now question I like to use is, what made it work then? And what can we leverage in that experience with the challenges we are facing today? So let's pull whatever's valuable to us forward, but recognize they're different. Do you see how that works? So this combination of empathy, like recognizing where they're coming from, but also moving their brain from then to now and unlocking the brilliance that we need from then, but applying it to the change that we need to implement today, then and now. All right. I hopefully answering these questions was helpful to you. Thank you for asking such incredible questions. I hope we have many other reasons to cross paths. And hey, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear how you're leveraging your everyday innovator style to move yourself through these uncertain and challenging times.